historian once said, "Power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely." You are welcome this afternoon to my class, and I want to I want to see what we can learn within 7 minutes. So I bring to you a topic from government: separation of power, checks and balance. Because check and balance happens to be the most prominent feature of separation of power. In fact, why separation of power is necessary is so that they can be checked and balanced. Because just like I said, just like that English historian said, that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. That is why power will not be domiciled in just one level of government. So power will be separated, shared between arms, between level of government, so that this one will not, so that one arm will not have monopoly of power, therefore abuse it. So that is why it is necessary. But what I want to, for the sake of this particular class, what I want to emphasize is how this thing is applicable to Nigeria policy. And I would love you to keep that in mind, because I want to use Nigeria as a case study as we go. We all know that the three arms of government we have is the executive, and the primary function of the executive is to formulate and implement policies. And we also have the legislature, and the primary function, they have many functions, but their primary function is to make law. We also have the judiciary. They have many functions, but their primary function is to interpret law. So what I want to share with us within few minutes this afternoon is to show you how this thing is applicable to Nigerian policy, how the separation of power, checks and balance is applicable to Nigerian politics. So what I will do in few minutes is to show you how executive can check the legislature, how executive can check the judiciary, how the legislature can check the executive, how the legislature can check the judiciary, how the judiciary can check the executive, and how the judiciary can check the legislature. Do you know that for a bill to be passed into law, the final stage of a bill being passed into law, meanwhile bill is a proposed law, I will do that in another video. The last stage is that there must be the executive assent. At the state level, don't forget we are using Nigeria as case study. At state level, the governor will have to assent to that bill. Having passed through necessary procedure in the House of the Assembly at the state level, and at the federal level also, having passed through necessary procedure and processes, it will still land on the table of the president, who happens to be the head of the executive. So, for the fact that it is the executive that have the power to that stage of passing a bill into law, is a means for the executive to check the legislature. How can the executive check the judiciary? Do you know that the head of the judiciary in Nigeria is Chief Justice? And when how Chief Justice is appointed is that the head of the executive, the president, will nominate him through recommendation from a independent professional body. In the case of Nigeria, we have the Nigeria Judicial Council. So Nigeria Judicial Council will recommend that probably is the most senior judge. Now, it's not the president that will now nominate him. So, through that also, the executive can check the judiciary. How can the legislature check the executive? There are vital appointments that executive cannot make without passing through the legislature. One example is ministers. Yes, so what the executive does, the head of the executive, the president, is to nominate minister and submit their name before the legislature. So they will still have to pass through the legislature. So it's applicable to ambassador and even chairman of some parastatal like EFCC, ICPC, and so on. The same thing is applicable to how budget is formulated. It's the executive that formulates budget through the Ministry of Finance and Budget, but it will still have to pass through the legislature. So through that, the legislature can check the executive. How can the legislature check the judiciary? I have mentioned it earlier that in the appointment of the Chief of Justice, who happens to be the head of the judiciary in Nigeria, it will come via recommendation of NJC, and it will be nominated by the executive and submitted before the legislature. So even the appointed Chief of Justice will still have to appear before the legislature. That is one way through which the legislature can check the judiciary. How can the judiciary check the executive and the legislature? There is something in government we call judicial review. Judicial review is that power that has been given to the judicial body of any country to check any law, that anything that has been passed into law, to check if it is within the confinements of the constitution. So there is a power that the judiciary have. They can subject any law being passed by the legislature and being assented to by the executive. They can subject it to probe to see if it follows the provision of the law. And through that judicial review, the judiciary can check the legislature and also check the executive. If you want the full package of my class, I teach students online for the full package. Don't forget to like my page, comment on my page. If you have any question, feel free to drop it on comment section, and I'm giving you my word that I'm going to make a video to answer your question. See you next time. Thank you.